Welcome to the Coffee Clutch, a social gathering for good conversation. Now, it's been some time since I've done a recording, and that's because of COVID. Because once COVID set in, I had kids coming back from college and a couple working from home. By the time you get 5 or 6 people at home every day, it's a little bit too noisy for any recording. So I'm glad to be back at it. Everybody's back at school or back at the office, and one has moved out of the house because he's gotten married, and the other has an apartment now, so my home is a little bit more quiet, and I have the ability to sit and chat a little bit over the old sayings, proverbs, and idioms. As mentioned originally, I love these old sayings because I think they carry in them a lot of wisdom that is still very apropos today. And each one has a nugget or kernel of truth that can be an insightful message to us even nowadays, although many of these are thousands of years old. It's kind of a connection between ourselves and those who've come before us. Today I want to begin with the saying or proverbial question: is the glass half empty or half full? Now, when I went to, it was english.stackexchange.com, where you get quite a bit of information about old sayings, it didn't seem that there was an absolute understanding as to where this saying originated. The furthest back they could find anything was it was in 1927 in a quote from The Mathematics Teacher, Volume 20. It says, "Do you know algebra?" said the rabbit. "Yes, I liked it in high school," said Alice. "What is one of the axioms of algebra?" "Equal multiples of equals are equal," said Alice, selecting the first she remembered. "Indeed," said the rabbit, "you will admit that a bottle half full is a bottle half empty." "Yes," said Alice. This was written back in 1927. Now, it seems rather odd that this has not actually originated from something much older than that, because the understanding is that this particular saying is prevalent in many countries around the world, and typically when that's the case, it's something far older than 1927. I, however, was unable to find anything further back than 1927. It is a saying that became popularized once again in 1985. It was February 21st, 1985, when Ronald Reagan was quoted as saying that in a press conference. So, the saying's interesting to me because, of course, as most of you know, it essentially recognizes that some of us have a predisposition towards being optimists and others pessimists. Those who are the pessimists see the glass half empty. Those who are the optimists see the glass half full. And that is kind of an interesting perspective. But I think we need to dig a little bit deeper and remember that somebody can frame a conversation in either the optimistic viewpoint or the pessimistic viewpoint. And when they frame the conversation, it will affect how you see the conversation, how you ultimately view the topic. And what I'm talking about here is COVID, because of course that's a timely topic. Now, when we look at COVID and we look at the CDC numbers, we see that we can look at them from different vantage points, either a pessimistic vantage point or an optimistic vantage point. I have kind of done a little survey here among friends and neighbors, and when I say to them, "Are you aware that 99.94% of the American population has not died from COVID?" The plague was like a third of the population. But from COVID, 99.94% of the American population has not died from COVID. People usually say, that's not true. I don't know where you're getting your numbers, but that's not true. Well, the numbers are right there at the CDC. Just depends on how you serve those numbers up, how you frame that conversation. All you have to do is take your phone, and if you have Siri, you simply say to Siri, what percentage
I'm listening.
What percentage is 222,162 of 331,563,370?
The answer is about 0.067%.
And if that's the case, then that means 99.94% of the people have not died, because the percentage of people who have died make up 0.067%. 0.067% of the population. That's very different. The feeling and the concerns about COVID are very different when you say to yourself, 99.9% of the people have not died? That only 0.06% of the people have died? That's a very different framing of the virus than when we get a tally of deaths every day. You can come up with your own conclusion as to how serious the virus is depending on how you look at it. I don't need to tell you. I'm just simply pointing out that you can look at the virus from a very different perspective. We can say that 2.7% of those who get COVID will die. 2.7% of those who get COVID will die. Here in the United States, it's much higher. In many countries around the world, much higher. I never understand those who keep saying America's doing so poorly as compared to other countries. I just look on CDC site and get the numbers, and I know like the UK is 10%, something like 10% of those who get COVID will die. That sounds a lot worse to me than 2.7%, but I'm not sure what people are talking about. These are simply just the flat out numbers from the CDC. So 2.7% of those who get COVID here in the United States will die from it. Or we can say 97.3% of those who get it will live. And I think you can begin to see how differently the same numbers, all of which are true, paint a very different picture, very similar to the glass. When one is told the glass is half empty, there's sort of this, that's unfortunate. But when somebody says, well, the glass is half full, that's a good thing, you do feel differently. Both are true statements, but it gives you a different perspective. And I hope for all of you out there that your takeaway from this particular old saying is that you have to be very vigilant about knowing how someone is framing the conversation. And how they frame it will affect how you feel about the particular conversation. It's very important. It's very important in politics, especially nowadays. Very important that we take time out to get the information for ourselves and to have a good understanding of where they're coming from and quite possibly how they want you to view something. So consider the CDC numbers in a way that's probably different than what you hear from the mainstream media. I, for one, feel pretty comfortable when I realize that 99.94% of the American population has not died from this. I certainly recognize that 222,000 people is a large number. I know there's all sorts of debates as to whether or not each one of those deaths was really a COVID death or not a COVID death, or somebody who died from COVID or with COVID. I don't know. And I'm not sure any of us are going to know the answer to that absolutely. What I do know as a matter of absolute fact is each one of those deaths was someone's loved one, and that's sad. Death is difficult. Death is hard. I do know that millions of people die every year, and I do know that every single day of our lives we take a certain degree of risk that we may die that day. Certainly getting into a car is a risk. I know that we could all drive 20, 30 miles an hour on the highway, never over 30 miles an hour, and tens of thousands of lives would be saved, and probably more than that. Those lives, while they may not have died, you would have protected someone from a serious injury. For whatever reason, we've decided collectively that it's worth the risk of driving a little faster. We do take risks as human beings. So while I'm never going to really know if every one of those deaths is absolutely a correct designation of a COVID death, I don't know. But what I do know for certain is the numbers that the CDC have put out represent that 99.94% of the American population has not died, that 0.067% of the population has died. Those are some pretty interesting numbers. I tend to look at the glass half full, at least I try to, because I think it's pretty rough to live life constantly with the idea that the glass is half empty. That kind of paralyzes you from enjoying life. There's a song out there, and you young people should know it. I'm going to live like I was dying. It talks about somebody who finds out they're going to die and wants to make sure that before they do, they live their life. They take risks. They enjoy things. It's kind of an interesting song, especially nowadays with this COVID pandemic and these lockdowns and shutdowns and social distancing and masks and a lot of things that are controlling, government control over our lives with probably very little positive results. And in fact, there's a lot of things out there that would suggest that the lockdowns and isolation create all sorts of other problems. But that's for somebody else to debate and discuss. My point here is that take those numbers for yourself. Go to the CDC, pick up your phone, ask Siri the question. If you can't do the math yourself, which I've got Siri, why would I do the math myself? And look at the percentages, the numbers that the CDC gives you. And I think if you look at those numbers with the idea that the glass is half full, I think you'll feel a little bit better about the whole situation. I know I do. So until next time, pick up your cup of coffee and try to figure out, is it half empty or half full? Mine is half full. Enjoy your day. And don't forget to push the like button. And I hope you'll subscribe and maybe tell a friend or two about the Coffee Clutch, and they can come and enjoy a little conversation as well. Talk to you soon.